She drank from the horse trough in front of the whole town. A Lakota chief poured her fresh water. The dipper was in my hand before I had decided to pick it up. That is the honest truth of it. I had not thought it through. I had not weighed what the men along the rail would say, or what Reuben Carver at the Mercantile would tell his wife that evening, or what the Reverend Hollies might work into his Sunday talk. I had not even thought about the woman. I saw what was happening, my hand moved, and by the time I understood what I was doing, the dipper was already full and I was already crossing the street. My name is Standing Bear. I am the son of Running Elk, who was the son of Crow Feather, who was chief before him. My people are Oglala Lakota. We had a camp then, a small one, 6 families on the south bend of the Calico River, 3 miles east of the town called Harrow Flat. I went into Harrow Flat perhaps twice a month for trade, flour, salt, sometimes nails or a spare buckle for harness. I did not linger. The men there were not hostile, most of them, but they were not comfortable either, and I had learned long ago that a man who makes others uncomfortable wears out his welcome fast, whether he has done anything wrong or not. That morning I had come in for flour and a length of rope. I had my horse tied at the post nearest the feed store. I was untying him, a 50-pound sack of flour already across his back, when the trouble started at the trough. She was a small woman, dark hair loose around her face, dusty from travel. She had ridden in on a bay mare that was badly lathered and in need of water. The woman climbed down, led the mare to the trough, let the animal drink. Then she cupped her own hands and drank from the trough herself, just a few mouthfuls, the way a person does who has been riding a long time in summer heat and has run out of canteen water. A man named Cord Duluth came out of the saloon. I did not know him well, but I knew who he was. He had a small ranch south of town, a mean place with thin cattle and a fence that was always falling down. He had also, I had heard, come back from the war with a particular hatred that he wore like a badge, a man who had fought and lost and needed ever since to be better than someone. He looked at the woman and he looked at the trough and he made a sound. Not words yet, just a sound. Then 2 other men drifted over from the rail. That trough, Cord Duluth said, is for horses. The woman straightened. She was maybe 30. Her eyes were dark, her skin a shade that made Cord Duluth's meaning plain enough she was part Indian, or the town took her for it, and in Harrow Flat in those years that was all the reason some men needed. My horse needed water, she said, so did I. Then you should have gone to the pump. The pump is on the other end of town. That's where your kind goes. The men along the rail didn't move, but they didn't object either. The woman stood her ground. Her mare had stopped drinking and was blowing through her nose. The woman's hand was on the animal's neck. I'll move along, she said. Her voice was level, not frightened, not begging. Just a woman deciding that this fight wasn't worth the trouble it would cost. But Cord Duluth wasn't finished. You already drank from the trough, he said. Same as the horses, that what you are. He wasn't quiet about it. He was saying it for the men on the rail and for the 2 men who had come up beside him and for anyone else in Harrow Flat who might be listening. He was making a performance of it, establishing something. I had the rope in my hand. I stood by my horse. And I looked at what was happening and something went solid in my chest, a kind of clarity that I have felt before in my life, not anger, not exactly, but a certainty that has no argument in it. The kind of clarity that is just, this is wrong and I am here and I will not watch it. I walked to the water barrel at the side of the feed store. The barrel was for the store's own use. Hatch, who ran the feed store, kept it filled from his private well. He had a tin dipper hung on the side. I filled the dipper, turned and crossed the street to where the woman stood. I held it out to her. She looked at the dipper, then at me. She was trying to read what I was, what this was. I don't blame her for that. A stranger handing you something, you want to know why. Fresh water, I said. The barrel is clean. Cord Duluth turned to look at me. The whole street had gone quiet. Not a lot of people in Harrow Flat that morning, maybe 15, maybe 20, but all of them had stopped what they were doing. Hatch had come to the door of his feed store. The Reverend was standing on the steps of the church at the top of the street with his hand over his eyes against the sun. The woman took the dipper. She drank from it slowly, the way a person does when the water is actually good and they want to taste it properly. When she was done, she handed it back to me and said, "Thank you." "You are welcome," I said. Then I turned and looked at Cord Duluth. He was a bigger man than me, wider through the chest. But I am not a small man, and I had been a chief since I was 32, and one thing you learn in that work is how to look at a man in a way that lets him know exactly where he stands. It is not aggression. It is just clarity. This is what I see, and this is what I think of it, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. Duluth looked back at me for a moment, then he looked away. He walked back into the saloon. The two men who had come up beside him drifted off. The men on the rail went back to their leaning. The street started breathing again. I went back to my horse. I tied the rope to the sack of flour and finished securing my load. Behind me, I heard the woman's boots on the dry ground. "Where are you headed?" she said. "East. 3 miles. Is there a place to camp along that river?" I looked at her. She was asking something more than the words. She had ridden hard and her horse was tired, and she didn't know this territory, and she didn't want to ride back through the center of that town again. "There is," I said. "You can follow if you want." She did. Her name was Clara Mast. Her mother had been Crow, her father a German trapper who had died of fever when she was young. She had grown up in the camps until she was 12, then in a white schoolhouse in Montana Territory, then in a series of lives that I gathered from the few things she said had not been particularly easy. She was coming from a town called Ridley, 2 days west, where she had had a job as a cook at a lumber camp, until the owner's wife decided she was too Indian to work around white men. She was going toward her mother's people, somewhere in the Eastern Territory, though she seemed uncertain of exactly where. We made camp at the river bend. My people's camp was a 1/4 mile further, and I had decided without quite deciding it that I would set her up here for the night before I went on. There was a good flat place above the water, sheltered on the west side by a cutbank and 3 cottonwoods. I showed her how to hobble her mare in the grass near the river so the animal could graze and drink through the night. I had my own fire going when Nara came down from the camp. Nara is my sister's daughter. She was 15 then, sharp-eyed and curious about everything, and she had seen me ride in with a stranger and come down to investigate. She stood at the edge of the firelight and looked at Clara. Clara looked back at her. "Her horse needs liniment on the left foreleg," Nara said in Lakota. "I can see the swelling from here." "Then go get some," I said. Nara disappeared. Clara was watching me. "She says your mare's left leg needs tending," I told her. "My niece will bring something." Clara looked at the mare, then back at me. "How old is she?" 15. "She sees things." "Yes," I said, "she always has." Nara came back with a poultice my sister makes from willow bark and cattail root. She went to the mare without any fuss, crouched, and started working the liniment into the swollen leg. The mare stood patient. Clara watched from across the fire with an expression I could not quite read, not exactly gratitude, more like surprise that had not yet become something else. "What is her name?" Clara said. "Nara." Clara said the name quietly, trying it. Then, in a slow, careful crow that was not quite fluent but was unmistakable, "Pila Maya, thank you." Nara looked up. For a moment she and Clara looked at each other across the dark. "Lakota," Nara said. She touched her chest. Then she pointed at Clara with a question in her face. "Absolute," Clara said, "Crow." Nara considered this. Then she nodded once and went back to the mare's leg. I sat with my coffee. The fire talked. The river moved. I had a sensation then that I have had a few times in my life, A sense that something is turning, not dramatically, not with any noise, just a slow pivot, the way a weather vane swings around when the wind changes. You don't see the moment it changes direction. You only know after that it has. I did not ask her to stay. I want to be honest about this because it matters. A man who takes in a woman because he has decided she needs him is a different kind of man from one who simply makes room and lets her decide. I did not decide for her. I made room. What happened is this. In the morning she helped break down my camp, rolling my bedroll, banking the fire, working with the particular efficiency of someone who has done it many times. When I came back from watering my horse, she had coffee made. Good coffee, from her own tin that she packed carefully in the saddlebag. And she handed me a cup the way you hand a cup to someone you have already decided is worth the gesture. We rode east together without discussing it. After 2 days, she was helping Nara gather the cottonwood bark that my sister's husband needed for his horse fence. After 4 days, she was cooking with my sister, Winona, in a way that started awkward, different traditions, different seasonings, both women feeling their way around a fire, and became, gradually, something that had its own rhythm. After a week, she had moved her things from the camp edge into Winona's lodge, at Winona's invitation. I stayed out of it. I went about my work. I had 50 horses to manage, an ongoing dispute with a rancher named Aldous who claimed his fence line ran through our grazing land, 3 young men in the camp who were at an age where they needed direction and were going to find it somewhere, and I preferred it be from me. I was busy. I told myself I was not watching Clara. But a man knows when he is watching. She worked hard. That was the first thing. Not performed labor, not the kind that announces itself, just steady, ordinary, the work that needed doing done. She had a way with horses that I have seen in maybe 4 or 5 people in my life, a quality of attention that animals respond to. The mare's leg healed faster than I expected. Nara took note. After 2 weeks, Nara was following Clara to the corral every morning. She was also, it became plain, a woman who had been hurt in specific ways that she was not going to talk about and did not need to. I have lived long enough to recognize the particular set of a person's shoulders when they are always partly braced for something. She had that. It was not weakness. It was what a person develops when the world has been casual with its cruelties toward them for a long time. You stay ready. I stayed out of it, but I made sure, in the ways I could, that there was nothing in our camp that would confirm her readiness, that the respect was plain, that when Nara called her by name, and when Winona offered her the better part of the stew, and when my sister's husband Yellowknife deferred to her knowledge about the mare, all of it added up to something. A person's shoulders can only stay braced for so long when nothing comes. The trouble with Cord Duluth came about 3 weeks in. He had been into Harrow Flat talking about what had happened at the Trough. I heard this from 2 different people, which meant it was probably true in its bones even if the details had grown. He was saying that Standing Bear had made a statement, that the chief was getting ideas, that somebody needed to make clear that the town's arrangements were the town's to set. I had heard versions of this before, in various forms, over 20 years. A man like Duluth needs a hierarchy because without it he is nothing. He had lost ground at the Trough, not much, just the moment where he looked away first, and that kind of man cannot leave a thing like that alone. One morning a group of 4 riders came into our camp. Duluth was not among them, but I recognized 2 of his hands. They sat their horses at the edge of camp, and one of them, a young one with a red kerchief, said they wanted to talk to the chief about the woman who was staying with us. I walked out and stood in front of them. "She's wanted for theft," the young one said. "Back in Ridley, there's a man coming for her." I looked at them. "What was taken?" I said. "Horse," the young one said. I let that sit for a moment. "The bay mare," I said, "the one she rode in on." "That's right. I have seen that mare," I said. "She has Clara Mast's brand on her left hip. I burned it there myself 3 days ago on Clara's request with Clara's iron." This was true. She had asked me to do it, said she'd been meaning to and never had the right equipment. If there is a man coming for that horse, I said, he will need to bring a better story than that. The young one looked at the other riders. She still needs to come with us, he said, with less conviction than before. She does not, I said. Chief. She is a woman in my camp, I said. Under my protection. If someone has a legitimate claim against her, they can bring it to me here in daylight with the paperwork that claim requires. You can tell them that. I waited. They left. I turned and Clara was standing behind me, maybe 10 feet back. She had heard all of it. Her face was careful, the way a face gets when a person is holding something in because they are not sure yet what to do with it. The mare is mine, she said. I know, I said. I bought her in Ridley. I have the bill of sale. I believe you. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, why? It was a plain question. Why do you believe me? Why did you say what you said to those men? Why any of it? I thought about how to answer that. Not because I didn't know, but because I wanted to say it right. Because I have been watching you for 3 weeks, I said, and you are not a woman who takes what isn't hers. She didn't say anything. She looked at the ground for a moment, then back up at me. All right, she said. That was the whole conversation. But something had shifted in it, something small and specific, and we both knew it. Aldous was a different kind of problem. He was not a bad man, particularly, but he was a man who had purchased a piece of land and had a specific idea of what ownership meant, and his idea and my idea were in direct conflict along about 400 yards of fence line. He believed the fence was where the original survey said it was. I believed, and I had an elder in our camp, a man named Otter Husitz, who was 74 and had been born on this river, that the survey was wrong by about 60 yards, and those 60 yards contained our best summer grazing. I had been arguing this with Aldous for 2 years, not angrily, just persistently. We had been to the county office 3 times. The county office had a map that agreed with Aldous. I had Otter Husitz's memory, which agreed with me. County offices and old men's memories. You can guess how the county office felt about that competition. What changed was Clara. She had, it turned out, in the string of lives she had lived before riding into Harrow Flat, spent 2 years as a clerk in a territorial land office in Wyoming. Not a prestigious job. She had gotten it because she could write in both English and, to a limited degree, German, and because the office was desperate. But she had spent 2 years reading surveys and title documents and the correspondence between county offices and territorial government, and she knew things about how those documents were produced and where they were likely to go wrong. She asked to look at the map. I got a copy from the county office. I brought it to her. She spread it on the ground and looked at it for a long time, turning it, measuring distances with her fingers, comparing it to the river's course. This river's moved, she said. Yes, I said. They surveyed this when? 1861. The river's shifted east since then, probably 30, 40 yards at this bend. She put her finger on the map. The fence post they used as an anchor for the western line, is it still there? There's an old post, I said, rotted. If it moved with the bank erosion, the whole measurement is off. She looked up at me. I'd need to see the original field notes. Do you know if they filed those? I do not know. The county office will have them, or they won't. If they do, she paused. I'm not promising anything. But if they do, and if the river shift is what I think it is, there's a case. I looked at her. I'll go with you, she said, to the county office if that helps. Why would it help? She gave me a level look. Because I know how to talk to those men, she said, and because they won't think I have any stake in it. We went the following week. Me, Clara, and Yellowknife, who came along because Yellowknife goes where he wants and nobody has yet found a way to stop him. Clara talked to the clerk. She was different in that office than she was at camp, not performing exactly, but deliberate. She asked for the field notes in the specific language the clerk expected, mentioned 2 territorial precedents I had never heard of, and had the papers on the desk in 20 minutes. Then she sat down and went through them with the patience of a person who has spent years in rooms like that. The post had moved. The river had shifted. The survey had anchored its western line to a marker that was now, by her calculation, 43 yards east of where it had been in 1861. It took 4 more months and 2 trips to the territorial office in Cheyenne, but we got the fence line moved. On the day Aldis's hand started pulling the fence posts and restringing them, Otter who sat on a rock by the old line and watched with his hands on his knees. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he looked at me. "Your woman is useful," he said. I said she is. I was aware, as I said it, that I had claimed her with a word she hadn't agreed to. I was also aware that I had been saying it that way inside my own head for several weeks. I will not make a romance out of the whole of it. That is not how it was. It was meals by a fire. It was a horse with a healed leg. It was evenings where we sat outside and she mended tack and I worked on a bow I was reshaping, and the river made its sound and neither of us needed to fill the quiet with anything. It was Nara laughing, for the first time in months. She had been grieving a friend her age who had died in the spring, because Clara had shown her something about braiding that made her laugh. It was small. Most of the real things are. What happened between us, between me and Clara, did not happen all at once. There was no single night, no single conversation that turned it over. It moved the way water moves under ice in late winter, invisible from the surface but present and doing its work. There was an evening in October. The cold had come early that year, first frost already on the grass, and we had brought the camp in tighter for warmth. I was sitting outside my own lodge with a hide across my legs, thinking about the winter pasture situation and whether we had enough put away. Clara came out of Winona's lodge and sat down a few feet away. She pulled her coat around her. After a while she said, "I've been thinking about going." I did not answer right away. "My mother's people," she said. "I've been putting it off, but winter's coming and if I'm going to go." "You should go before the pass is close," I said. "Yes." Another quiet spell. The fire had burned low. "Is that what you want?" I said. "I don't know," she said. "I've been trying to figure out what I want. That's not something I've been particularly good at." I thought about that. I thought about the bay mare and the trough and Cord Duluth's face when he looked away. I thought about the county office and the field notes. I thought about Nara's shoulders being looser than they had been in spring, and my sister bringing Clara into her lodge, and Otter Husitz calling her useful, which was about the highest thing he said about anyone. "I'm not going to ask you to stay," I said. She looked at me. "If you go to your mother's people, that is right," I said. "A woman should know where she comes from. I'd ask Yellowknife to ride with you as far as the Cheyenne crossing. The trails up there have had trouble. He can find his way back." "And if I don't go," she said. "Then you don't go," I said. She was quiet for a long time after that, long enough that I thought maybe she had said everything she meant to say. I went back to looking at the fire. Then she moved. Across the space between us, onto the log beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her through my coat. She did not take my hand. She did not lay her head anywhere. She just sat beside me close and said nothing. After a minute, I put the back of my hand against hers. That was all. But it was enough to say what needed saying, and we both knew it. Winter came hard that year. We lost 2 horses to a blizzard in early December. They got turned around in the white and drifted south, and by the time we found them, they were down. I don't like losing horses. There is something particular about it, a failure of care, even when the failure is weather, and weather is no one's fault. I dug them out anyway, and I sat with each one for a while before we left them. A man can at least do that much. Clara did not come with me to find them. She stayed in camp and managed things there, kept the fire, helped Winona with the youngest children who were sick with winter cough. When I came back that night, cold through and later than I'd meant to be, she had food ready and the lodge was warm, and she did not make a speech about it. She just put the bowl in my hands and sat down across from me while I ate. That is what I mean when I say a good woman, not the sentiment of it, the fact of it. A person doing the thing that needs doing without theater because they have decided you are worth the doing. I told her about the horses. She listened. She asked the right questions, not to say anything smart, just because she was paying attention and wanted to understand what had happened. When I was done, she said, "Were they good horses?" "Yes," I said. "The gray especially. He was 12 years old. I'd had him since he was 2. She thought about that. "I'm sorry," she said. 2 words. But she meant them, and I could tell she meant them, and that was the whole of what was needed. We had a hard winter, and we came through it. That is about as much as you can ask of a winter. In March, Cord Duluth came back. He had been quiet since the incident with his riders in the fall. I had not heard much about him. But in March, he filed a complaint with the county sheriff, a man named Voss, who was reasonable but also careful about which fights he got into, saying that Clara Mast was living in an Indian camp without proper sanction, and that the situation was disruptive to the peace of the county, and that steps should be taken. Voss rode out to see me. He was courteous about it. He sat on his horse at the camp edge, and said he was sorry to bother me, but he'd had the complaint lodged, and he needed to at least ask about it. "What steps is Duluth asking for?" I said. "He wants the woman removed from the county," Voss said. I let that sit. "She is here by her own choice," I said. "She is here under my protection and by my people's welcome. She has broken no law. She has a valid bill of sale for her horse if that is still the claim, and she has been here for months without any trouble except the trouble Cord Duluth makes for her." Voss nodded. He looked like a man who had expected roughly this answer and was working out what to do with it. "I'll need to speak with her," he said. "She is here." Clara came out and spoke with Voss for about 10 minutes. She was the same as she had been in the county office, clear, calm, factual. She told him about the bill of sale, about the job in Ridley and why she had left it, about where she had been in the months before she came to Harrow Flat. She did not explain herself more than she needed to. She answered the questions she was asked and left out the rest. When it was done, Voss looked at me. "I'll tell Duluth his complaint doesn't hold," he said. "I'd appreciate that," I said. "Chief," Voss said. He paused, looking for words. "He's not going to let this go." "I know," I said. "He can keep not letting it go. He won't come into my camp, and I will not run a woman out of her home because Cord Duluth's feelings are hurt." Voss took that in. Then he nodded, touched his hat, and turned his horse. Clara was standing beside me. She had heard all of it this time, too. "Her home," she said. I looked at her. "You said her home," she said. "Yes." She looked at the river for a moment. The ice was breaking up in patches, big gray chunks turning slow in the current. The grass along the bank was still winter dead, but the color of the mud had changed. Under it somewhere, invisible, the green was already moving up. "I'd like to talk to you about that," she said, "about what that means." "All right," I said. "Not right now." "Whenever you're ready," I said. She nodded, then she went back inside. She came to me 2 days later. We walked along the river for a while. She talked slowly, feeling her way through it. She said she had spent a long time being a woman without a place, not a place of land, but a place of belonging. Crow enough that the white world would always mark her. White-educated enough that some of her mother's people looked sideways. Nowhere quite her own. "I stopped looking for it after a while," she said. "A place like that. I decided it probably wasn't real, that it was something people told themselves." And now, I said. She didn't answer right away. We walked. The river was loud with the melt. Something happened, she said. I'm not sure exactly when. Somewhere between Nara and the fence line in that winter. Yes, I said. I don't want to go to my mother's people, she said. I mean, I want to know them, someday, but not now, not, she stopped. Not instead of this. I stopped walking. She stopped too and turned to look at me. Her hair was loose in the wind off the river, and she was not trying to look a particular way. She was just herself, a woman standing on a cold river bank in March, saying a true thing. I am not a young man, I said. I know. I am a chief of a small camp with enemies and a complicated fence line, I said. She made a sound that might have been a laugh. I know that too. If you stay, I said, you stay as my wife, not because I am owed that, because I am too old to do the thing where we don't say what we mean. She looked at me for a long time. I was hoping you'd say something like that, she said. I looked at her. Yes, she said, to all of it. I put my hand out, she took it. We stood there by the river for a while, holding on, the melt water roaring past us, the whole valley thawing. We were married the way my people marry. My sister laid out the red blanket and we stood on it in front of the camp, and I wrapped it around both our shoulders, and the elder Otter Husitz sang the old words while Yellowknife and Nara stood as witnesses, and Winona cried quietly into her sleeve and pretended she wasn't. Nara had made a pair of moccasins for Clara. They were good work, better than she'd been doing 6 months before, the beading tight and the sole well stitched. Clara put them on and stood in them and looked at Nara for a moment. Pilamaya, she said again, Crow, thank you. Nara shook her head, she pointed at herself. Wapilla, she said, Lakota, thank you. They had been having this argument for months, each insisting the other deserved the gratitude. It was their argument, I stayed out of it. But I watched it happen, watched my niece, who had been closed off and grieving in the spring, standing in the early April sunlight with her chin lifted and her eyes bright, and I thought, this is what a good woman does without knowing she's doing it. She arrived with nothing but a tired mare and a tin of coffee, and somehow the whole camp is different. There is no other explanation. It is just what she brought. The Cord Duluth problem resolved itself in the end, the way some problems do, not because you forced them, but because the world eventually gets tired of them. He had a bad summer. His cattle got into something and he lost a third of his herd. Then his south fence failed and he spent 2 weeks restringing it. Then in September a man he owed money to came looking for payment, and there was a falling out that ended with Duluth leaving Harrow Flat more or less permanently. I heard he went north, toward Montana. I did not hear much more than that, and I did not need to. What I remember from around that same time is a morning in late summer when Clara and I were at the river before anyone else was up. The light was the particular gold you get in August at that hour, flat and warm, and the horses were in the near field, and the camp was quiet. We were sitting on the bank, and she had her legs over the edge and her boots off and her feet in the water, which was lower and slower in summer, and she was looking out across the river at nothing in particular. I was watching her. I was thinking about the Trough and the Dipper, and the morning I had crossed that street without thinking about it. I was thinking about what you cannot plan for, how the thing that matters most is often just a turn in a road on a morning that looked like any other morning, and you go left instead of right, and the whole rest of your life is different. She turned and caught me looking. What? She said. Nothing, I said. She gave me the look she gives me when I am being deliberate about not saying something. She has gotten better at reading me over the years, and I have let her, because I like being read by her. I was thinking about the Trough, I said. She looked out at the river. I think about it sometimes too. What do you think about it? That I was ready to leave, she said. I had my horse. I was going to get back on and ride. And then, she looked at her hands. A man I didn't know crossed the street with a cup of water. That is what happened, I said. Why did you do it? I've told you, I said. Tell me again, she said, not coyly, just wanting to hear it. Because it was wrong, I said, and I was there and you needed water. She nodded slowly. That's it, she said. That's all it was, I said. She thought about that for a while. The river moved. A fish jumped somewhere out in the current and was gone. Then she turned toward me and put her hand on the side of my face, the way she does sometimes, just her palm flat against my jaw, looking at me. And in all the time we had been together, I had never gotten used to that look. The particular weight of it. A woman who has been careful her whole life and has decided, specifically, deliberately, without being pressured into it, to be careful with you. You were going to go back to your horse, she said. You'd bought your flour, you were done. Yes. And you crossed the street anyway. Yes. She held my face in her hand for a moment more. Then she said quietly, simply, I'm glad. She turned back to the river. I put my hand over hers, where it lay on my knee. The gold light moved on the water. The horses grazed. Somewhere in camp behind us, Nara was starting a fire, the sound of the wood catching coming faint across the morning. We sat like that until the rest of the camp woke up. That is the story. That is all of it. Some things don't need more than they are.